What if I told you the Christian world split in half because of a single letter? Not a war, not a massacre. A single document placed on a sacred altar, and the moment it touched the marble floor, nearly 1,000 years of unity shattered. For centuries, Christians prayed together, worshiped together, and lived under one church. But behind the scenes, two powerful cities, Rome and Constantinople, had been locked in a silent conflict built on pride, power, and ancient rivalry. In 1054, everything finally erupted. A historians today understand something crucial. The Great Schism was not born in a single day. It was the final spark in a long chain of political, cultural, and theological tensions. To understand the moment Christianity split, we must return to its earliest foundations and the long road that led to the breaking point.
For nearly 1,000 years, the Christian Church remained united. But beneath the unity, divisions were forming in language, politics, culture, and theology. Both the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church trace their origins to the teachings of Jesus and the Apostles. Both call themselves Catholic and Apostolic. Both claim continuity with the early Christian community. In the West, the Pope in Rome gradually became the central authority, recognized as the successor of the Apostle Peter. In the East, the Patriarch of Constantinople held influence but shared authority with other major centers of Christianity, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem. The differences deepened over time. The West used Latin as the language of faith and government. The East used Greek, preserving traditions rooted in ancient philosophy and imperial ceremony. When Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in 313 and moved the capital to Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople, the distance between the two halves of the empire widened even further. In 380, Emperor Theodosius I made Christianity the official religion of the empire, shaping both East and West under one faith, but very different political systems. After Theodosius died, the empire permanently split between his two sons. The Western Roman Empire eventually collapsed in 476, sinking under invasions, economic crisis, and political chaos. The Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, survived for nearly 1,000 more years. As centuries passed, cultural and political identities hardened. Western Christians looked to the Pope as the primary defender of order. Eastern Christians saw the emperor and the patriarchs as partners in safeguarding tradition. Differences in worship grew. The style of liturgy, the role of icons, the interpretation of doctrines. Among these disputes, one became especially symbolic: the filioque, a small phrase added to the Western version of the Nicene Creed, stating that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. To the East, the West had altered a universal creed without consultation. To the West, the change clarified doctrine. Both sides saw the other as overstepping. These tensions did not explode immediately. They simmered and waited until the 11th century, when personalities on both sides collided with force.
By the mid-11th century, tensions between Rome and Constantinople were impossible to ignore. The rise of Patriarch Michael Cerularius marked a turning point. He believed the Eastern Church had allowed Latin customs too much space and worked to restore ancient Byzantine practices. He closed Latin churches in Constantinople and criticized Western traditions, including fasting on Saturdays and using unleavened bread in the Eucharist. Rome viewed these actions as direct challenges to papal authority. In response, Pope Leo IX demanded that Greek churches in southern Italy adopt Latin rites or be shut down. The East retaliated, escalating the conflict. Into this volatile environment stepped Cardinal Humbert of Silva Candida, strict, unyielding, and fiercely loyal to the authority of Rome. Humbert arrived in Constantinople carrying letters addressed to both the emperor and the patriarch, outlining Rome's grievances and demanding recognition of papal primacy. But diplomacy failed immediately. Humbert saw the East as rebellious. Cerularius saw Humbert as arrogant and illegitimate. Neither was willing to concede. Unbeknownst to both men, Pope Leo had died before Humbert reached Constantinople. This meant the delegation technically had no authority, but Humbert pressed forward anyway. Negotiations stalled, then collapsed entirely. And so began one of the most consequential confrontations in Christian history.
On July 16, 1054, the tension reached its breaking point. Inside the great cathedral of Hagia Sophia, worshippers gathered for the divine liturgy. Incense drifted through the air. Golden mosaics shimmered beneath the massive dome. Then the doors opened. Cardinal Humbert and the papal delegation entered. They walked past clergy and worshippers without stopping. They approached the altar. Humbert placed a papal document, a bull of excommunication, directly on the sacred table. It declared Patriarch Michael Cerularius and all his supporters excommunicated. Gasps echoed, voices rose in anger and shock. Humbert turned and walked out without a word. There was one enormous problem. The document was technically invalid because the Pope who authorized it had already died. But the gesture could not be undone. 4 days later, Cerularius responded. He convened a synod, denounced the papal bull, and formally excommunicated Humbert and his companions. 2 signatures, 2 declarations, 2 halves of Christianity, breaking communion with one another. Historians describe this moment as a symbolic act that revealed a division centuries in the making. No armies, no battles, but an irreversible fracture.
The excommunications of 1054 did not immediately split the Christian world in the eyes of ordinary people. Life continued normally. Liturgy continued. Trade continued. Prayers continued. But relationships between Rome and Constantinople quietly deteriorated. Over the next century, hostility grew. The first major shock came in 1182, when political chaos in Constantinople led to the massacre of thousands of Latin Christians. Men, women, and children were killed in the streets. The West was horrified, and trust between the churches collapsed. But the greatest wound came in 1204. The Fourth Crusade, originally intended to reclaim Jerusalem, was diverted to Constantinople. Western crusaders attacked the Christian city, breached its walls, and looted its churches. Sacred relics were stolen, icons were smashed, libraries burned. A Latin government was installed over an Orthodox population. For the Eastern Church, the humiliation was unforgettable. For many historians, 1204, not 1054, marked the true death of Christian unity. 2 worlds that once worshipped side by side now saw each other as opponents rather than partners.
For centuries after the schism, the Catholic West and the Orthodox East continued to grow apart, not through conflict, but through identity. Both traced their roots to the same apostles, the same scriptures, and the same early councils, but their paths diverged completely. The West strengthened papal authority, shaped universities, and built kingdoms with Rome as a central pillar. The East preserved ancient liturgies, celebrated mysticism, and maintained a balance between church and empire. Attempts at reunion occurred in 1274 and 1439, but neither lasted. Unity made sense in theory, but neither side could surrender the identity it had built over centuries. In 1965, Pope Paul VI and Patriarch Athenagoras formally lifted the mutual excommunications of 1054, a symbolic gesture of healing, but the churches remained independent. Today, Catholics and Orthodox share the same ancient faith, the same sacraments, and many of the same saints, yet they continue along separate historical paths. Understanding the Great Schism is essential to understanding the modern Christian world. Its echoes shaped nations, cultures, borders, and religious identity across continents. The schism did not begin with hatred. It began with misunderstandings, pride, politics, and decisions that no one expected to become permanent. A document placed on an altar, a response signed in a council, two actions that reshaped a millennium. The Great Schism was not the end of Christian unity. It was the beginning of two stories, both ancient, both proud, both still unfolding.